Emily Hahn, who is the co-author of the book Wild Remedies. I'm going to really let Emily take it from here because she has an incredible amount of knowledge to talk to us about.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure a lot of you have noticed, whether you're a longtime gardener or you're newly curious about gardening, you probably noticed during this pandemic, so many of us are experiencing this growing desire to connect with the green world more than ever. A lot of us are wanting to grow and harvest our own food and also our plant medicine, whether that's in our yard or a raised bed or pots on a windowsill. We're looking to connect with local resources in our communities like Figure Supply and just simply spend time outside, experiencing the benefits of breathing fresh air and feeling the sun on our faces, listening to the birds sing. I think we're really craving that connection with nature and our immediate surroundings, even if that's just noticing the small weeds that are popping up in the cracks of the sidewalk or retaining wall. And this is also important for our own lives, I think, from the food that ends up on our dinner plates to our mental health. And we can also be part of a movement to restore society's connection to the earth and make positive changes in the face of ecological destruction and everything. Here, I'll get my here we go. Everything that faces our planet today. So these are some of the things that really drove my co-author Rosalie de la Forêt and me to write our book Wild Remedies. And Wild Remedies, our subtitle is How to Forage Healing Foods and Craft Your Own Herbal Medicine. So in some ways, it's a book about harvesting plants and making recipes and remedies. It's also an action guide to becoming deeply connected to the world around you.
Emily?
Yes.
Sorry, I lost your video.
Oh, dear.
I have Emily on video.
There you are. Okay, back again. All right.
Right back? Yeah. All right.
Can I just say, before you go on, as a reader, I would like to give a little introduction to everyone about the book. This book is so beautiful and so dense. That's the first thing that struck me. It's so dense. This is a book you'll be reading for years and years and years. Emily starts with the principles and the basics of all the herbs, and then she takes you on a lovely journey through the seasons of what's available during the seasons. Very quickly, Emily, a lot of people in Ireland think that there's no seasons in Los Angeles, that everyone's in their shorts on the beach all day long, all year long. But of course, there are seasons here, and that must have some impact on the plants also that you're talking about in the book.
Oh, most definitely. And one of the interesting things is my co-author Rosalie lives in Washington State and I'm here in LA. And as we were working on the book and the plants and realizing, she and I have such different seasons, and thinking about our readers, living in such varied places and experiencing different seasons, we really wanted the book to not be about living in a very particular place or to be, super bioregional, that anyone could work with the practices in the book and learn to observe those seasonal rhythms where they live. So here in LA, we think we have no seasons, but once you really start paying attention and tuning in, you notice there are definitely seasons in LA. Sometimes I think, it's more than just 4 seasons or 5 seasons. It's like 100 little micro seasons, the time when the citrus blossoms are blooming, or the jasmine is out, or that you start noticing different birds or insects around you. So and that just adds, and we live in a city, and noticing all those little things adds so much to your experience and wonder to your daily life, that I think that we most definitely have seasons that affect the plants that we're going to see and harvest as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I always know it's like the middle end of spring when the jasmine's blooming. It's like it's such a clear marker of time, and then the jacarandas after that.
The jacaranda,
right? Yeah,
that's starting to happen now.
Yeah, it's jacaranda season. Yeah. I think it's so there's just so much joy and that sense of rhythm, throughout the year really can be really powerful to notice that around you. So. In the book we've divided into seasons, but with the caveat that the way the book is might not necessarily match up with where you are. Some of them that we put in spring, for example, here in LA might actually be an autumn or winter plant because that's when we have like more rain coming. So it's but it's about tuning in to where you are so you can experience that power. So yeah, so it's really about, wherever you live, learning about and ethically gathering those plants, whether you're foraging wild plants or wildcrafting, as we call it, or growing your own plants.
So that's a really interesting point. Before we get into the questions, is there's a lot of talk about ethically harvesting wild plants. Can you give us a little bit of insight into that?
Yeah, I think that there can definitely, when we're harvesting plants from the wild, if we approach that with this perspective that it's just free food or free medicine and it's just ours for the taking, we can just grab all we want, then we throw away a lot of what is the healing wisdom from those plants. And there are a lot of downsides to foraging, which is, I think, one of the reasons we wrote the book, and we're really concerned, with the trends of foraging, whether it's for yourself or chefs and florists and things like that. Because if we were really, if we harvested them without that sense of awareness about how we can really tend to the plants the best, we can harm those plants themselves. We can prevent them from being future harvests for ourselves, and we could harm the ecosystem, including animals that really depend on the plants for food or for shelter. You could imagine just hillsides that are just stripped bare of plants or sensitive species being wiped out, and that has happened due to our overharvesting. And there are examples of plants that has happened with. Echinacea is really popular medicinal plant that it has been almost wiped out from the wild due to overharvesting. So that's one plant that we put in the book, but really not as a forage this plant, but as a cautionary tale, and to really encourage people to grow it in their gardens. Yay, Echinacea!
And I see you mentioned in the book you have a piece on chickweed, and yeah. My instinct is, I have no doubt that there is so much chickweed out there because it's all over my yard every year. So I don't think that we're at risk of overharvesting that ever.
Yeah, so it's really about paying attention to where you are and what the abundance of the plants is and who else might depend on the plants, whether that's little pollinators or birds, and so really paying attention to all that. And even before you start harvesting, have the intention to give more than you take, and then in that way we can give back, we can be regenerative, and a lot of the plants we focus on in the book, things like weed, like you mentioned, it's really about harvesting those kind of weedy species that are really abundant, and in some cases can even be harmful to our native species. So yeah, we really want to approach it with that perspective of attention and caregiving, and recognizing the interdependent relationships in the ecosystem.
Nice. Now, you're going to hate me for asking this question. If you had to pick one plant in the book that you love the most, is there one?
They're all my children. That's a hard one.
It's like they asked me which tomato is your favorite.
Right, yeah. It totally depends on the season, because a lot of these plants, they'll come and go, and they can offer us different gifts, at the time. I would say right now, probably mallow is a favorite one of mine. It's a Malva species, so it grows in a lot of gardens and disturbed soils. I have a little show and tell here. Here's a little mallow.
Ooh, beautiful.
You can see that, but anyway, you just picked that out outside my house a little while ago. But a lot of gardeners, just can't stand mallow. It's a weed to be ripped out, but it's actually been used for thousands of years for food and medicine in Africa and Asia and Europe. So we have a lot of different species of mallow. Here in the LA area, it's mostly Malva parviflora, which is a taller one. We have Malva neglecta that tends to be shorter to the ground. And then there's Malva nicensis, which is a bull mallow, and it's a lot bigger with bigger leaves and flowers. So I won't really go into a lot of botanical identification today, because it's hard to see with me just talking, without actual plants and images and stuff. But that's all in the book, or and I always encourage people to look at many different sources when you're learning to identify plants. So at least 3 sources. So not even just my book, but also field guides or going on a walk with a local knowledgeable person, and to make sure, because that's really you 100% want to be positive of your identification so that you can be safe when you're foraging wild plants. But this mallow, it's related to the marshmallow and okra. So so if you think of okra or even marshmallow, it has that kind of slippery or slimy kind of gooey factor to it. Herbalists might call it mucilaginous or demulcin. And that might not sound, that like, why would you want that? But it can be so soothing and cooling to like hot or dry tissues. So this past week, it was so hot and dry in LA, and we had these like hot winds and had horrible allergies, and my throat was all scratchy. And so it was like mallow was my favorite plant ever this past week. Because so I would make I've got my mallow cold infusion here, make a cold infusion of mallow leaves and flowers or roots. And that kind of like slight slipperiness, it's so soothing. And so things like, a dry cough or swollen throat, things like minor burns, stuff like that. It's also great food.
Does it behave in the kind of same way as aloe?
Similar, yeah. If you kind of think about situations where you might use aloe, that kind of similar quality where it cools and soothes. You can also,
By the way, as Emily is drinking there, what looks like a cocktail, she also wrote a beautiful book, I think 4 or 5 years ago, called Wildcrafted Cocktails. It's really gorgeous. And
drinks and
she's an amazingly talented photographer. In every drink in that book, I want to drink when I see the picture. Sam, do you have questions?
No, I mean,
yeah.
All right. I want to hear. I know we're going to cover a few more things, and my big thing is, a lot of things like we grow it. Right now I have my mullein in my garden is blooming right now, and it's so beautiful. My anise hyssop is booming. I have all these things, and I think the biggest thing is like, okay, now what? How do I use it now? Where, are these best as teas? What part of the plant do I use? Like with the mallow, you said the roots and the flowers, and same with mullein, I know it's mostly the leaves, correct? Or do you also use the flowers in mullein? I can't know off.
Yeah, the leaves, the flowers, the roots, kind of like so there's all different plant parts. Not every plant you use all parts, but for a lot of these plants, you might use them for different things. There's also knowing like when to harvest them.
Exactly, yeah.
So you often think of harvesting when the energy of the plant is most in that part. So leaves, usually earlier in the season, as that's where the energy of the plant is focusing on growing its leaves, or the flowers later in the season, kind of just as they're starting to open. And then in the autumn, a lot of times the above ground parts will die back, and the energy of the plant is really in the roots. And then that's like when you might harvest the roots, kind of the autumn, winter, or early spring period. So you're kind of thinking, in a lot of cases about that. Also the life cycle of the plant itself, whether it's an annual or a perennial or a biennial. So that can affect, when you might harvest it, as well as your harvesting actions, because you'll know whether you might be killing a plant, if you're uprooting it, or harvesting leaves in a way that, supports more growth, so that you're not stripping the plant, bare of its essential leaves. Doing things like leaving enough flowers so that the plant can develop fruits and seeds and then reproduce. So really kind of knowing, there isn't one blanket rule for all plants, but getting to know those particular plants and what the plant's needs are, so that you can best caretake it and ensure that there's future harvests, unless it's something that you're just pulling as a weed out of your garden. Just making sure that you're tending to the plant, leaving enough of the plant for bees and other creatures, and then making the best food and medicine for yourself.
Well, it's a thing I didn't really want to tell people, but we planted a medicinal herb garden in front of the nursery. The reason I didn't want to tell them is because I don't want to come down tomorrow and they'll all be gone. But some of the things that were really interesting to me was we grew tobacco, Nictania, and I thought that was a annual plant, but it turns out it's been going bonkers since we planted it last year. It went through the whole winter and everything.
Yeah, I think because of where we live, a lot of plants that would, potentially be annual plants or end up, going for like seasons and seasons. So, yeah.
So is LA, because our climate's mild, does it make a lot of plants that would not be annual in colder places, that would be annual in colder places, does it make them perennial in LA?
Yeah, I think calendula is like a good example. In most places that would be an annual, but, I have calendula just keeps coming back, year after year, and the actual plant itself, as well as it readily seeds itself, all over the place. But so there's an example of a plant that would really continue on for a long time where we live. And yeah, you mentioned like, the idea of people might harvest all the medicinal plants that you've grown in front. And like I was saying, that could be a concern if people are going out and thinking of this, as kind of a me first mentality, or, just kind of harvesting everything. And so we're really hoping that that we can look at it, step back and slow down, really think about, the giving more than we're taking, taking only what's appropriate for our needs, and thinking about our community's needs as well. And, participating in things like, growing more plants, in your garden, or in a, local habitat restoration effort, or, even like picking up litter, or, things like that, so that we're not just taking, we're also giving at the same time.
Absolutely.
That's a nice sense. I have a friend, whenever he goes to the beach, himself and his wife, they bring 2 little bags and they pick up trash on the beach and bring it back to the trash can. They do it every time they go to the beach. So it's the same thing when you go out into the wild, right, in the parks.
I think you had a list of herbs specifically that you wanted, and plants that you wanted to talk about. And I think that would be great, things that are readily available in
Yeah, I was thinking like, we have like 24 plants in the book, and you could probably go on for hours about any of them, but just, thinking about what it is that we have here, that I'm seeing a lot around us, particularly in LA, but are also available in a lot of other temperate regions around the country, around the world. So like mallow, as I mentioned, is one of them. So let's see, I mentioned that one, kind of how you would use it. And that's one where you would use leaves, flowers, roots, even the seeds. Like a lot of people call mallow cheeseweed because the little seeds look like these kind of like little tiny wheels of cheese, or little buttons. So before those get, really dry and they're still kind of tender, you can eat those. I just made some little quick pickled mallow seeds this week. And again, that's one that is just, I hear so many gardeners just like, oh, I have so much mallow, and maybe leave some of it for yourself. Also, it's a host plant for the painted lady butterfly. Last year we had this, like just river of painted lady butterflies moving from LA, and I noticed so many of them were laying their eggs on the mallow, and then you'd see little caterpillars there. So I leave some, just for that reason. But if you are pulling it out, like this week I did, it was crowded. It was blocking the sunlight from a lot of the other plants that I, was intentionally growing. So I'm pulling it out with gratitude and then using it to make, medicine. I, have been drinking those cold infusions, and drying some to make teas for later. You can also use the leaves, like just, saute it, or the species with the big leaves, you can use those like to make wraps. And so there's like so many fun things you can do for that. And that's one that you can, cut off the top few inches of growth, and it'll continue to grow more. Eventually it'll tire out. But you do want to make sure mallow can pull out heavy metals from the soil. So pay attention to your harvesting areas. And that's a thing, along with safety, where in addition to making sure you can, identify the plant, 100% is harvesting from areas that, haven't been contaminated with like pesticides or runoff. You want to stay away from plants that are right along a roadside or a golf course, former industrial sites, things like that. In the book, we have a section called Getting to Know Your Soil, and it's actually an excerpt from The Ground Rules, which is a publication by Nancy Clem. Over here. So that's a really cool guide to like learning about the soil where you live. And then also like soil remediation. A lot of these weeds are interesting because, like I mentioned, they can pull out those heavy metals from the soil. They could also, in a lot of cases, you wouldn't want to eat that particular plant, but they can be used as part of an effort to remediate soil. So the mallow is one that is kind of, all over LA right now. I'm seeing a lot of. Another one is the wild mustard. I got my little show and tell, the wild mustard.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I love that.
So yeah, this is the yellow flowers that so many of us see, all over our hillsides. And that's in the Brassicaceae family. So that includes, they're related to things like, excuse me, sorry. I have no some water.
I don't believe that's water. I think that's gin in there. Is it?
Yeah, it's gin with some mallow
Connor adds
flowers.
11. It's not even noon yet, Connor.
We'll add the gin later. Yeah, but this is all mallow leaves and flowers, and it's so refreshing and soothing. But there are thousands of species of mustard worldwide. It's like cabbage and kale and broccoli, and all species of the mustard family are edible. They're not all necessarily delicious and palatable, so you have to try around. But once you learn how to identify them, it can be a really easy plant to forage. Just like real quick, like the flat. Learn about the flower pattern in the mustard family. They've got like 4 sepals and 4 petals and like an X or a cross shape. And then it's got 6 stamens, 4 tall ones and 2 short ones. So once you kind of learn how to recognize that, then it's a great thing to forage because you can taste the mustard plants wherever you go. Here we have several different species in LA, but it's mostly these yellow flowers. But we also have the wild radish, which could be like white or pink or purple flowers. I don't know how well you can see that here, but
what part of the plant do you eat or consume?
Yeah, so most of us are probably familiar with mustard seeds, that you would use in cooking or to make like a mustard condiment. So you can collect the seeds from the wild mustard and use them that way. But you can also, the flowers, are so pretty, and they're just like the most wonderful garnishes for, like sandwiches, your avocado toast,
and the flowers are
salad.
Spicy also, right?
Yeah, they just add, besides the color, they add this little like spicy bite to them. So depending on the species, some might have a little sweetness, some might be, more like horseradishy. So you can use the flowers. That way you can also use the leaves. Usually I stick to the younger leaves because they'll be more tender and less pungent. But you could cook them, just like if you grew mustard greens in your garden. You would cook the leaves. You could also use them raw. In the book I have a recipe for mustard greens chermoula sauce that I love putting on like roasted vegetables and potatoes and stuff because it's kind of like a little bit spicy. So medicinally, again, that's it's got that spicy, hot, pungent quality to it, so it can warm you up, get circulation moving if you're chilled, stimulate things like think of eating spicy food and it gets your mucus running, you're like congested, sometimes congested is like go out and like eat some mustard flowers, and if I'm on a hike or something and feeling tired, that little like peppery zing, kind of wake a little bit. Different species will taste different. They can also taste different throughout their life cycle. So I would say just try it a little bit and see what you think. And that's one that can be really aggressive, in spreading all over. The mustards here, have crowded out a lot of our native wildflowers and species. A lot of species of mustard are allelopathic, so they actually have like chemicals that can inhibit the growth of other plants. So that's one where, in a lot of cases we can kind of harvest, very abundantly because we might be, helping other plants grow our native plants by harvesting the mustard. That's another one that can pull heavy metals from the soil. So you do, again, want to be careful of your harvesting areas.
What about...
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. You and I spoke about how our allergies have been awful these past few days. And I see here in your spring section, nettles is on there.
One that can be great for allergy season. Usually kind of I find that it better on like a nettle tea or infusions. You can also eat the nettles. Starting earlier in the season and kind of like building it up. It's not so much necessarily wipe out the allergies, like on the spot right away. But nettles are also super nutritious. Lots of vitamins and minerals in them. So that's one that, depending on where you are in LA, you can find growing wild, or you could plant in your garden. We have a wild species here. So Urtica dioica is the one that most kind of grows probably most widespread and people tend to think of for food and medicine. But we have a dwarf nettle, and that the dioica is actually a perennial. We have a dwarf nettle here that's an annual. and that one I've found growing around my yard and stuff. So that's kind of an interesting, different one that we have.
Is it stinging?
It is. Yes, it definitely stings. Nettles, it's very drying though. So I find that because our climate is so dry that if I take too much nettle, that I feel like super dried out. So it's depending on kind of your own constitution and where you are. Yes. Oh yeah. Thank you for showing. We have like these botanical illustrations in the book that were so fun to work with our illustrator to create those illustrations in the book. Thank you. It's just showing the different parts of the plant to help you with identification, as well as there's a mustard one. But also, if you look in each illustration, there's a little insect or another little animal, and because we were really kind of bringing in that idea of these plants being part of a relationship in an ecosystem. So it's not just the plant by itself, or not even just our relationship with the plant, but the plants have relationships with pollinators and other insects that use them for food and shelter and nursery habitats. So yeah, hopefully it's fun for people to look through the illustrations and find those little creatures in the pages.
So when we talk about foraging, I mean, you can forage so much from your own yard. If you've got any size yard at all, there's hundreds of different plants there at any one time that are growing wild, right?
Oh yeah, there's just if you've got a yard, there's probably all kinds of plants. Even if you don't, just as you're taking walks, you can see plants just growing along the side, and depending on where you are, it may be something you want to forage or not. But it's just wonderful to learn about them. I think just to be more connected to where we are and all this life that grows around us. Another one that is all over us right now in LA is the elderflower. And here's one that elderflower that I picked from a tree in our front yard today. So these like kind of white or cream colored blooms, you'll see them kind of all over the hillsides in LA and along the rivers and stuff. They smell so nice. So this is one that you'll see a lot of, these flowers right now. We're kind of depending on where you are in town. Again, like we talked about seasons, there's also like microclimates in LA. So,
sure.
It might be in bloom in one place, it might be, a month later somewhere else. And so that's kind of fun actually to get to know those little, just those little nuances of where
elderflower is not to be confused with elderberry, right?
So it's the same plant, Sambucus nigra and subspecies. So here in LA, we mostly have the cerulean, or it's like the blue elder or the Mexican elder. So like a European elder will have more purple blackberries, and ours here generally are the blue ones, or sometimes they have like a whitish cast to them. So those are the ones we'll see here. So right now we have flowers, and then later in the summer, those will become berries. So those are actually, and that species I was mentioning is native here in California, and then there are many other species of elder that are native throughout the world.
I want to say the leaves smell like peanut butter, right?
They do, and some people really don't like the smell of the leaves. It doesn't bother me. But
yeah. It is funny, yeah.
But that's one that grows wild. But I also really encourage people to, if you have a space, to consider planting it and growing it, so that you're foraging, in your own area, not damaging sensitive ecosystems, and it's also an opportunity to create more food and habitat for more animals and more wonderful treats for us, because you can use the flowers and the berries. The flowers themselves make wonderful like syrups and cordials. So it's hard to describe, but it's a wonderful floral kind of muscat, wonderful perfume scent. You can make a syrup with that and mix it in like sparkling water or with cocktails and things, and drizzle it on cake, all kinds of stuff you can do with that. The flowers are also used medicinally to support like fevers and nourishing the skin. So you can, and then the berries, later make all kinds of remedies with those, and foods and jams and syrups. And so you can, I would say gather the flowers. I like to gather them in the morning, kind of, after any, like moisture or dew has evaporated, but not so late in the day, because later in the day they can get kind of a weird musty, some people call it like a cat pee smell. So you want to kind of, smell the flowers, and you want to gather them if they actually smell fragrant to you. And then the flowers attract a lot of insects. So I always shake them off, whatever I'm gathering, kind of like shake the flowers, and then I leave them out for like an hour or so outside and let the little bugs crawl away. And some people are really squeamish about the bugs, but to me, it's such a great opportunity to learn, more about, again, those relationships and about the bugs that live around us. So like I'll be there taking pictures of the insects as they're leaving the flowers and then trying to identify them and learning more.
I really like that idea of, showing the illustrations of the insects and giving us a sense of like it's actually a little microcosm exists around that plant.
Yeah.
I really like the idea. That's lovely.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there's so many wonderful, fascinating worlds going around us, and so these plants are kind of a way for us to enter into that and learn more about where we live. And so you can, if you keep harvesting flowers, they can plant can often will grow new flowers, but it will get tired after a while. So again, you don't want to over harvest. You also be aware that the flowers, when they're pollinated, will then turn into berries, and you want berries for later. For yourself, for the birds, for the plants to reproduce. So that's another wonderful one that we have growing around us right now. And so those are ones that are wild, but you could also you could deliberately grow in your garden too. Another one in the book is mint, which in a lot of cases, there is a wild mint, field mint, but there's also a lot of cultivated mint, whether it's peppermint or spearmint, or all the many wonderful different kinds of mint that are available.
Mint, Moroccan mint.
Yeah, mint is so fun. Yeah. There's so many different wonderful ones, that you can taste, and we're probably, all familiar with using, mint in teas and cocktails and in our food. But it also has a lot of medicinal benefits. Research has shown that mint can be really good for reducing nausea and promoting digestion. So after a meal, having a cup of mint tea. And that's just so nice because it's like medicine that actually tastes delicious. So that's great. A mint tea can also help like relieve pain, such as like a tension headache. Drinking the tea as well as making the tea and then letting it cool down enough, dipping a washcloth in that, and then using it like it's a compress, on your forehead or on the back of your neck for stress headache. So that's really good.
Is it a digestive also, mint? I know in
Yeah.
some cultures they always have mint tea after dinner.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, it helps promote the digestion. So, and it usually be the ones that are more like a little more spicy or more aromatic will be, have that more of that effect. So you can taste your different mints and see and experiment. A lot of people come into the nursery and they say, "Oh, my mint died," and I think what people don't realize, it doesn't really die. I mean, after a certain point, it'll go dormant. The leaves will dry up and fall off, and then it will come back with a vengeance a few months later. So it never really dies per se, right? Yeah, that one can be so so aggressive. So most of the time you want to plant it in a container, not directly in the ground. But again, one that you can
definitely not in the bed with your other vegetables.
Yeah,
because it does take up.
Yeah, I've got all my mint in each one is like in its own pot. But you can just as you're harvesting it, pinch off the few top inches of growth and stimulate more growth. So that's really easy one to grow. We've got some fun mint recipes in the book. Like here's our botanical illustration for mint. That's beautiful. That's a wild mint. But yeah, mint chimichurri, which is so delicious. Fresh summer rolls with mint.
So good.
So yeah, especially in our hot weather, it's just so refreshing to have that in our food or our drinks, and growing, whether you have a big garden or just a few pots, just having your mint, so it can just add that little bit to your food and drinks, as well as knowing that you have it. If I'm like having a meal and I'm like feeling bloated or just like need some help with digestion, I'll just go out in the backyard and just pick some mint and eat it, or make a tea. And just having that just a little pot, of medicine, right at your fingertips is so wonderful.
It's gorgeous. Let me ask you this: woolly blue curls, one of my favorite. native
Yeah.
plant, which is basically a native rosemary.
Mhm.
I've never actually been able to see it anywhere where I live growing wild. Is there certain conditions that it likes?
Yeah, I've rarely actually seen it growing wild too. I
Yeah.
grow it in my garden, and it just started blooming this past week. But yeah, it'll tend to like more of like chaparral, kind of drier conditions.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I'll occasionally see it out in the wild, but most of the time, yeah, they're a fun one to grow because you can use those flowers. They're so fragrant, and those would make nice, nice cold water infusion or tea or something like that too.
One thing I haven't gone through the chapter yet, maybe you can, is that you have a whole section on blackberry and raspberries, which I thought was interesting. I wanted you to like kind of chat about that. We sell them in the store, and I obviously know they have antioxidant value, but I guess I'd never really thought of them as a medicinal plant in any way, or I just haven't.
Yeah, that's a fun one because we just think of it as it's delicious, for food or for drinks, and we have a recipe for making a blackberry raspberry shrub, like a drinking vinegar that you can add to sparkling water or cocktails, and so that's wonderful. But it also medicinally, if you think of like eating those blackberries or raspberries, and it has that sourness and that kind of like astringency, like kind of makes your mouth like pucker. So that that sourness can be used in herbal medicine too, as both for digestion as well as kind of that astringent action. Like if you got like an inflamed like sore throat or something like that, like a tea made from the leaves of the blackberry or the raspberry could be really helpful. So there's a lot of again, like we talked about the fruits, but then there's also the leaves, and people use the roots as well for that. So again, a lot of these plants, we might be familiar with one particular way to use it or one part of the plant, but in a lot of cases there are like so many different ways and to benefit from it. And like Conor was saying, you could go through this book or any lots of different learning about plants and herbs. It just could be endless. But for me, that's I think one of the wonderful things is that you learn a little bit here and a little bit there, and you build on that, and it's just like an ever growing, widening, scope of things that we can discover.
I mean, I'm just going to show this picture and the blackberry page. Let's see, can I get it on the screen there? Can I get it centered right there? I mean, it's so detailed. It's telling you how many petals, the pistils, and they're so well drawn. There's a little moth on there. I mean, the detail's really incredible. I'm impressed that that you had all the illustrations done.
Thanks. Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, what I love about it too is it really invites you to learn more. It's not like a book called 10 quick medicinal recipes you can forage. It's really invites you to actually get into it and learn more. And it's basically a starting point for people who don't know anything that really want to learn about this.
Yeah, I really wanted it to, not be like, me telling you like, this is how it is, and these are the 10 plants you need, but really so you can have your own experience, learning about where you live and the plants where you are, and these particular plants, that we chose them because they're very widespread, and a lot of cases, if it's not wild, you could easily grow it in your garden, or even in some cases find it at the market. But that you could take this same approach and knowledge and to learn about any number of plants where you live. And yeah, like I mentioned, there's like lots of different plants in the book. We have like dandelion and echinacea, plantain, and I think some of those are plants that you have at Big Earth. So I don't know if people have questions about those. Yeah, Sam, you were just mentioning that you have prunella or self-heal in at the store, and that was one that Rosalie and I wrote the book. We wrote about like 2 times, we like twice as much, and so we had to cut a lot of chapters. It was very cool, but in the process,
they call it murdering your children in the writing business.
Yeah, I know, it was terrible. But one of those was prunella, and so we made it available as a bonus chapter for people to download a PDF about prunella. We also have one on rose petals. Rose hips are in the book, but we did one on the rose flower and also the calendula. So if you get the book, there's in the back there's a little page that tells you how to get those bonus chapters on those plants. Yeah, like those, they're also wonderful. You didn't want to leave anyone out. Do we have any questions from people?
Well, Beatrice asked, do you sell blue elderberry sambucus plant at the nursery? And, I'll take this moment. We had a partnership last year with a wonderful organization, Grow Good, and we had the most incredible medicinal herb selection available at our store, and we had just such a beautiful variety of tulsis and sages and California native rose, and I mean, just the list went on and on of what we had. And there's been some changes, and we aren't able to carry those things anymore, and we're really hoping that it's something that we can do again for next season, because it was incredible to offer those things. Yes, so many of these things are in the wild, but as you said, like, you need to be so thoughtful and careful that you're not taking too much, without giving back. We really love being able to offer these things for people to, plant them in their backyard and offer this, habitat. But hopefully soon, right, Conor? We'll have those.
Yes, I'm hoping we can get such a nice project, because we curated a whole line with the people at Grow Good, who are very knowledgeable, Corinne McAndrew, very knowledgeable about medicinal herbs, and they curated a line with us that was so fantastic. And obviously the changes that happened on the farm there didn't allow them to be able to grow for us, but we're working on getting it back, and I'm optimistic that we can do that.
Yeah. And then Shelley just asked, how do we get the book? Shelley, we will have it available on we have 8 copies here, right? We'll have it available on our store, and so on our online shop, so you can add it to your cart with whatever else, or just get the book and schedule a pickup date and time. And then you can also get it on, you want to tell this part, Emily?
Yeah, it's pretty much available from any bookseller. So, if you want to go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or something, they'll have it. But also, supporting your independent bookstores is great. If they don't have it in stock, something that they can order. It's, widely available books. So, but get it from Fig Earth too, and get some plants at the same time. This would be great. Anyone who does get the book, make sure to go to wildremediesbook.com. There we have a lot of bonuses for people who get the book. So once you have bought or ordered your book, you can go to wildremediesbook.com, enter your name and email. Like a big docu-series, and we made cool printable labels with all the herbs and the recipes in the book. So you can put those on your jars, and got some video lessons and all kinds of cool stuff. So make sure you don't miss out on that if you get your book.
I feel like I want to see your larder. I picture 5,000 jars of different things in there, elderflower.
There are a lot of jars. Yeah, it's kind of spread in different locations throughout the house. As one area gets filled, and it's can we use this corner as well? But yeah, my husband Gregory gets to put up with a lot of jars in his life.
It would be wonderful to do a tutorial on kind of like a tour, a home tour of all the things that you're making, and kind of
that could be fun.
What it is that you're doing and all that. That'd be great. Okay, sorry. It was another question from Beatrice. She's a student of yours, so she would like to grow elderberry hedge in her garden. But I don't have any other questions right now. I didn't know, Conor, did you have anything else that you wanted to chat about as far as the book or anything that we carry here?
I had a couple of questions about. It's very interesting to talk about the plants as remedial in the yard. Most of the weeds that grow, in fact, there's no such thing as a weed, right, Emily? Everything has some purpose, or
right, yeah,
part to it. Dandelion is a thing. When I pull them up, the roots are like 1.5 feet long. Mm-hmm. Is that deep rooting, the deep rooting system of those plants, does that allow it to absorb more minerals into the plant? Is that what makes them so nutritious?
Yeah, they'll be so rich, so deep, pulling minerals out of the ground, and so that can be great for us, they can be so nutritious. But at the same time, if you were dealing with soil with like lead or something, then that's not something that you particularly want. So knowing the soil where you are, or growing things in a raised bed, can ensure that you're doing that safely. There's a really cool book.
I grew up in Michigan, and if anybody heard me say I intentionally planted dandelion, they would think I was totally crazy. It's just, it's everywhere, and it's in their culture over there. It's like it's a nuisance. There's like no value to it at all. But if they knew they were sitting on this, like,
in Ireland.
If they knew they were sitting on this landmine of herbal remedies, then maybe they'd change their process. But
that's the thing. Like some of our, most common plants are like so, provide such amazing medicine and food.
Oh yeah, they'd be like, "Girl, you've been out in California for way too long. You're planting dandelion."
Yeah, I have dandelion, growing in my raised bed, and I was like so excited, last year when the first flower bloomed, and I told a friend of mine who was elsewhere, and she was like, this is hilarious, like. I wanted to point out this book, Invasive Plant Medicine by Timothy Lee Scott, is a really cool book. He talks a lot about like the studies of like soil remediation and kind of looking at these plants in a different way. That they're not just like invasives to be eradicated, but that there are a lot of benefits and ecological benefits to these plants.
So let me ask you a quick question. I know from talking to people over the years that there is, in most people's yards, a residual lead content in the soil, usually not nowhere near the EPA danger levels, but there is some lead in the soil because of pollution over the years. I think the EPA is 60 parts per million, and maybe the soil in my yard or anybody's yard would, if they're just in a place that wasn't a gas station, would probably be maybe 10 or 15. Mm-hmm. Is that a thing to have any concern about? I would say it is a good idea to get your soil tested, and the University Extension Service, Cooperative Extension, offers soil testing that's really affordable, in some places free. So like here in California, or basically any state in the U.S. is going to have a Cooperative Extension Service that offers soil testing. So it's a good idea to do that, so that you can get a sense of whether it's a dangerous level, where you don't want to be harvesting. But raised beds are a great option. I think that's probably a thing we might offer down the road, Sam.
That would be cool.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be wonderful. Well, I think that, did you have anything else you wanted to discuss, Emily? Something that you really wanted to talk about and we didn't get to?
Let's see. Well, I think just getting to know those plants that grow around us, whether it's the weeds, or there's a Nancy Clem, who's an ecological systems designer. She called it spontaneous vegetation instead of weeds, and I love that. I love that term. So whether we're getting to know the spontaneous vegetation around us, caretaking the land, growing things in our gardens, harvesting our own food and medicine, I think that just brings so much joy and wonder and healing into our lives. So I think we can really just take this moment of our renewed interest, in our local plants and gardens, and to create a more resilient world, in the times that we're in, and really just knowing that taking care of the earth and taking care of the plants and is intertwined with taking care of ourselves and our communities, and I think I love that Big Earth is providing a place in our community where we can come together. And
we feel very aligned to you, Emily, and you have a lovely philosophy, and that's lovely work that you do.
Thank you.
So if people have questions post-show, what is the best way for them to contact you? I mean, are you doing little safe-at-home consults, or how?
Yeah, you can go to my website, emilyhahn.com, and then from there you can email me and find my social media links as well. And I have been doing, it's been kind of fun doing some online consults of like what's in my backyard, types of things, helping people with that kind of stuff, as well as the books and other online offerings. So it'd be wonderful to connect with people.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Conor. It's
Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you both.
Well, have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.